I want you to just take a second and like really look around the physical space you are in right now.
Yeah, just take it in.
Right. Most of the time, our minds and our bodies are, relatively in sync. We feel safe in our environment. But what happens when the physical world you inhabit becomes, for all intents and purposes, a literal torture chamber?
A place where you just can't escape.
Exactly. When your own physical body, the walls of the room you're in, the people assigned to care for you, when all of it becomes this source of profound, unyielding pain.
It's terrifying to even think about.
It really is, because if you cannot physically walk out the door, how far out into the cosmos will your mind travel to, like, build a safe room?
Well, the thing is, when the biological vessel is trapped, the mind becomes this astonishing engineer.
Wow. Yeah.
It will construct escape routes using whatever materials it has on hand. So physics, philosophy, history.
Whatever it can grab onto.
Right. And sometimes the architecture of that escape is so intricate, so dense, and just entirely alien to the rest of the world that society simply slaps a label of madness on it and, well, locks the door.
Which brings us to our topic today. We're getting into some exceptionally heavy, deeply philosophical, and to be perfectly honest, profoundly tragic territory in this deep dive.
Very heavy. We have a massive stack of Dutch source materials on the table today.
We do, and they essentially split into two intersecting narratives, right? The first is this sweeping, uncompromising philosophical treatise on the collapse of modern meaning.
Yes. And the second half of our material grounds all that high-level philosophy into a very real, very agonizing human life.
Right, a specific person.
Exactly. We have access to an incredibly extensive 30-year psychiatric and personal dossier of a patient. And for our discussion, we're just going to refer to him as Johan or J.J. Wickmans.
So our mission today is to explore the collision of those two things. Like, what actually happens when you take a highly sensitive, exceptionally intelligent mind, subject it to cascading layers of psychological trauma, and then drop it into the rigid, punitive machinery of modern institutional psychiatry.
But it is vital, and I mean really vital, that we don't just read this as a medical plot.
Oh, for sure.
If we just look at his charts and read off his clinical diagnoses, we miss the actual tragedy here entirely.
We miss the whole point.
Right. This entire dossier is a monument to a catastrophic failure of communication.
A total breakdown.
Because on one side, you have a deeply wounded individual practically screaming for someone to validate his existence, to understand his reality.
And on the other side?
On the other side, you have an unyielding medical system that is functionally deaf to anything except the language of compliance and, well, chemical sedation.
God, that is bleak. But to even begin to understand Johan's story, we actually have to step back, right? We need to look at the philosophical framework he ultimately uses to make sense of his own suffering.
We do. We need to look at the blueprint of the world as described in our first source text.
Right, the treatise. It describes our modern society as a, quote, desert of choices. And reading through this, I mean, it paints an incredibly bleak, almost apocalyptic picture of the culture we all participate in every single day.
He really pulls no punches. The author of the treatise builds their critique around the concept of logos.
Logos, okay, let's unpack that.
So in classical philosophy, theology, ancient thought, logos represents the original fundamental unity of the universe. It's the underlying order, the profound, mystical depth of human existence.
The thing that holds it all together.
Yes. And the core argument here is that in the 21st century, the logos has been entirely shattered.
Shattered. And the text specifically blames haste and spectacle for this, right?
Exactly. Haste and spectacle.
Like, we are so obsessed with efficiency, with constant motion, with just being entertained 24/7 that we've completely paved over any capacity for deep contemplation.
Right. Truth is no longer something we seek out. Truth has been downgraded into just another weapon you buy and sell in a marketplace of competing narrative.
It's all just content now.
Pretty much. The treatise goes incredibly far, actually describing modern society not as a functioning civilization, but as a nihilistic death cult of consumerism.
Nihilistic death cult. That phrase really stuck with me, especially when the text dives into how it views the concept of money and power.
Oh, the money aspect is fascinating.
Because, historically, societal order was maintained by absolute power, right? Like kings, religious authorities, emperors.
Yes, top-down authority.
And faith was the psychological buffer. Faith gave the average person meaning and protected them from the terrifying random chaos of the universe.
But when that absolute power loses its sacred character, when society secularizes and the traditional concept of God fades away, that psychological void has to be filled by something else to keep the masses organized.
Right, you can't just have chaos.
Exactly. And according to this philosophy, the replacement is money, but it redefines money in a truly chilling way.
Yeah, it doesn't just see it as economics.
No, it doesn't see money as a medium of exchange at all.
Yeah.
It calls money stored obedience.
Stored obedience. Man, let's unpack that term because it completely changes the way you look at your own wallet.
It really does.
It argues that money is essentially a digital or paper receipt proving how thoroughly you have complied with the system.
You perform the tasks the system demands.
Right. You suppress your natural human instincts, you sit in the cubicle, you don't complain, and in return, you get tokens of stored obedience.
And those tokens are the only things that allow you to survive.
Yes. And because the system of obedience is so absolute, the text argues that all of society is walking around in a state of mass, low-grade psychosis, completely alienated from our true nature.
Which brings us to the absolute most dangerous part of this society.
How it handles dissent.
Exactly. How it handles the people who refuse to comply, or honestly simply cannot comply. The text specifically targets modern medical and psychiatric institutions here.
Right.
It views them as the 21st century equivalent of panopticon.
Okay, the panopticon. For those who don't know, that's the classic prison design, where a single guard in a central tower can watch all the inmates in a circle around them.
Yes, Jeremy Benson's concept.
Right, and the inmates never know exactly when they're being watched, so they internalize the guard's rules and end up basically policing themselves.
Exactly. And the culture inside these modern psychiatric walls, according to the text, is built on what it calls a gospel of containment.
Gospel of containment.
Right. The primary goal is not to heal a fractured soul. The goal is to contain the disruption the patient is causing to the surrounding compliance society.
Wow, so it's about making them invisible.
Yes. They demand what the author calls a litany of compliance. And within this rigid structure, a clinical diagnosis ceases to be a medical tool. It becomes an ontological death sentence.
Okay, I want to make sure we are crystal clear on that term because it is incredibly heavy. When the text says ontological, it's talking about your very state of being, right? Your existence.
Your fundamental reality.
So an ontological death sentence means the person you were, your actual identity, is basically executed by the diagnosis.
Executed is the right word. The diagnosis completely rewrites your reality.
So you stop being a person and just become a label.
The moment the doctor writes schizophrenic or borderline or psychotic on your chart, your lived human story is erased.
It's gone.
If you express anger, it's not because you have a valid reason to be angry, it's a symptom of your pathology.
Yeah.
If you express fear, it's a paranoid delusion.
There's no way to win.
None. The system enforces this erasure through heavy medication, which the text brilliantly and terrifyingly terms consent under sedation.
Consent under sedation. Reading this, I kept trying to visualize this modern tyranny, and the text uses the word Antichrist to describe the overarching system, which sounds, incredibly dramatic.
It evokes a lot of religious imagery.
Right, but we shouldn't picture some fiery monster with pitchforks crawling out of a medieval painting. If we look at our own lives, the modern Antichrist described here is just an invisible digital network.
It is the ultimate soft tyranny.
Soft tyranny, exactly. It's the endless, sprawling administrative protocols. It's the electronic medical dossiers that quietly force you into submission.
The paperwork.
The paperwork. It's the endless scrolling of consumer convenience that numbs your brain. You don't even notice you're being dominated because the cage is made of algorithms and clinical diagnoses.
You just tap agree.
Right, you just tap agree on the terms and conditions of your own psychological containment.
And if you try to fight back against a cage that is allegedly made of care and convenience, you inevitably sound like a lunatic to everyone else who has already accepted those terms and conditions.
Yeah, that is terrifying. So now that we have a grasp on this incredibly bleak philosophical landscape, this desert of choices where institutions erase individual identity, let's look at a human being who was completely swallowed by it. Let's trace the life of Johann.
Right. To understand the phenomenological reality of Johann, and by that I mean stepping outside the objective medical facts and looking purely at his subjective first-person conscious experience of the world, we have to go back to the very beginning.
We have to start at childhood.
Yes. We have to look at the origin story of his fractured reality. He was born in December 1994 in the Netherlands, and the roots of his entire complex psychological architecture start with a massive terrifying physical event when he was just 2 years old.
Right. And we should clarify, this wasn't a psychological trauma initially, right? It was a somatic one, a bodily trauma.
It was entirely physical. When Johann was 2, a housekeeper accidentally brought cat hair into his family's home on her clothing.
Just on her clothes.
Just on her clothes.
Wow.
But Johann suffered a catastrophic, life-threatening asthma attack. It was so severe he was hospitalized for 11 days.
11 days. I want you to pause right now and really try to inhabit the mind of a 2-year-old child. Because at 2, you do not have the language or the cognitive development to conceptualize what asthma is.
No, of course not. You just know panic.
Great. You just know that suddenly, out of nowhere, the most basic automatic function of staying alive, drawing air into your lungs, is completely failing. You are actively suffocating.
It is the absolute destruction of physical safety.
Yeah.
When we analyze his later journals and letters phenomenologically, we see that this wasn't just a bad childhood memory. This suffocating terror formed the foundational blueprint for his entire worldview.
It rewired him.
Completely. It instilled a permanent, paralyzing fear of mortality. He internalized the environment not as a place of play, but as a place that could spontaneously murder him.
He even had a visual anchor for this trauma, which he wrote about decades later.
The inhaler.
Yes. When he was finally discharged from the hospital, he was given an asthma inhaler. But it wasn't some brightly colored, friendly pediatric toy to make him feel better.
No, it was very medical.
He described it as having this stainless steel clinical gray spacer. He wrote that just looking at it, just holding this cold metal object, was a continuous tactile reminder that death was always standing right next to him.
And what is truly staggering, though, is the cognitive leap his toddler brain made regarding the meaning of his illness.
This part just broke my heart.
It's devastating. Even at that impossibly young age, he perceived the immense, paralyzing fear that his near-death experience caused his parents.
Right.
And his mind did something extraordinary and tragic. He took the blame for their suffering.
He genuinely believed that if he died, the grief would absolutely destroy his parents' lives.
Yes.
Therefore, his own survival was no longer just a biological instinct. Breathing became an agonizing, altruistic duty. He felt he had to stay alive not for himself, but to protect them from the pain of losing him.
We really need to pin this moment to the board because it is the exact genesis of his later vast geopolitical megalomania.
The seed is planted right here.
Exactly. The core psychological equation is written in his brain. I am solely responsible for preventing the catastrophic suffering of others, and I must do it at the cost of my own peace.
Wow.
At age 2, the others were his parents. By age 30, the others would be the entire human race.
So you have this little boy who is already carrying the existential weight of the world on his shoulders, living in constant terror of his own breath. And then the external scaffolding of his life, his family structure, completely collapses.
The destabilization is rapid and total.
Yeah, it just falls apart.
In 2001, when Johann is around 6 or 7, the family moves from the Netherlands to Belgium.
Which is a huge deal.
Huge. For an autistic child, someone who desperately relies on predictability, rigid routines, and familiar environments to feel safe, an international relocation is deeply fracturing.
And it gets worse almost immediately. Just a year later, in 2002, his parents divorce.
Right.
The mother takes custody of Johann and his younger twin siblings. And Johann's own writings describe this new environment as fundamentally unsafe. He experienced intense emotional neglect.
He felt his mother was completely unavailable.
Yeah, he believes she used him as a sort of projection screen for her unresolved anger toward his father.
And then the final thread, keeping him tethered to the world, snaps in December of that same year.
Oh man, this is rough.
It is. Johann was heavily bullied at school, but he had exactly one friend, one single kid who supported him and acted as his protector. And tragically, horribly, that friend drowned.
It's an almost unfathomable sequence of compounded losses for a child. I mean, think about it. His own body betrayed him with the asthma. His geographic home was taken away. His family structure shattered. His mother is emotionally distant. And his only protector in the world suddenly dies.
So how does the medical system respond to a grieving, terrified, autistic 8-year-old whose behavior is inevitably becoming difficult for his mother to manage?
Not well.
Not well at all. The records show his mother frequently described him to various agencies as unmanageable and sick. The system's response was to introduce him to child psychiatry and put him on heavy antipsychotics.
At 8 years old.
At 8 years old, he was prescribed Risperdal.
We have to push back on the sheer absurdity of this medical response. I mean, you have a child who is clearly acting out because he is drowning in compounded grief and trauma.
Right, he's traumatized.
Isn't treating a child's profound terror of the world by prescribing heavy antipsychotics like treating a child who is afraid of the dark by surgically removing his eyes?
That's intense.
But it's true. Yes, you've stopped him from seeing the shadows, you've stopped him from crying out, but you have fundamentally broken the child in the process.
That is a brutally accurate metaphor for the biomedical model's failure here. The system doesn't treat the terror. The system treats the behavior.
Because the behavior is annoying.
Exactly. His distress signals were inconvenient to the adults around him, so they used chemicals to suppress the signals.
And Johann wasn't blind to what was happening. He internalized this medical intervention completely. He didn't view the Risperdal as medicine helping him heal. He viewed it as society and his own mother sending him a clear message. Your fundamental, raw human existence is defective, and it must be suppressed.
This profound sense of betrayal ushers us into the next phase of his life, spanning from roughly 2007 to 2015.
The dark years.
We can really think of this era as the trauma machine. Johann is now a teenager, firmly trapped inside the institutional system, and his behavior escalates predictably into intense paranoia and mania.
Because he's fighting for his life.
Right, and the psychiatric system's response to his escalation is entirely predictable.
More chemicals.
More chemicals. They throw an unbelievable amount of polypharmacy at him. They take him off the Risperdal, Triceracel, then move to Zyprexa, Abilify, Solian, and Atonate. These are heavy sedatives designed to chemically restrain the brain.
To understand why Johann fought so viciously against these doctors and these drugs, we need to look at his cognitive profile.
Yes, the intelligence test.
Right. In 2008, during a particularly long admission, he was given the WISC-3 intelligence test. And the results illuminate the sheer agony of his daily mental life.
The numbers are fascinating.
They are. He scored a verbal IQ of 109, which is above average. He has a vast vocabulary, a high capacity for complex, abstract words.
But his processing speed was scored at 88, which is below average.
Think about the neurocognitive reality of that gap. It is a severe, incredibly painful cognitive dissonance.
It's like having the engine of the Ferrari attached to the transmission of the bicycle.
Yes, exactly. He has the theoretical intelligence to conceptualize vast philosophical arguments about the universe. But when he tries to process fast-moving sensory information or execute tasks under pressure, the transmission shatters.
He bottlenecks.
Right. He obsesses over tiny details and just freezes.
And the psychologist who administered this test made a very specific note in the file that explains so much of his later behavior.
This is a crucial note.
They wrote that Johann outright refused to accept anyone's opinion unless they could provide a, quote, solid logical explanation.
Which perfectly sets the stage for his lifelong war against psychiatric authority. He is an individual demanding absolute, flawless, granular logic in a medical system that very often relies on the paternalistic, because the doctor said so.
Yes, the authority of the white coat.
When a psychiatrist hands him a pill and says, take this, Johann demands to know the exact mechanistic pathway of how this chemical will cure his existential threat.
And when the doctor can't provide that.
Johann views them not as healers, but as fraudulent, oppressive tyrants.
But his ideological war against the doctors is just the backdrop to the sheer physical horrors that come next.
Yeah. We need to be extremely clear about this next part, because it deals with severe trauma.
Johann claimed to have suffered 2 catastrophic events while locked inside these facilities, events that he documented in his later legal complaints and euthanasia requests.
The first defining trauma occurred in 2008 during a stay at a psychiatric facility in Münsterbilzen. Johann was just 13 or 14 years old.
He's just a kid.
And he explicitly states in his writings that he was sexually assaulted, raped by an unknown woman within the facility.
And the detail that makes this so unimaginably horrific is how he claims it happened. He states he was completely incapacitated, blacked out by the massive doses of antipsychotics the system was forcing on him.
He was chemically paralyzed.
Yes, he couldn't fight back, he couldn't speak, he couldn't run.
The second major physical trauma he reports happens years later, in 2015, at a different facility in the Netherlands. He states he was violently attacked and strangled by a fellow patient.
And he firmly believed this strangulation caused permanent ischemic brain damage.
Meaning tissue death from lack of oxygen.
Exactly.
Now, when reading a thick psychiatric dossier filled with someone's complex delusions, the immediate cynical instinct for a lot of people is to play detective.
Right. People want proof.
To ask, Did these assaults actually happen in objective reality? Is there security footage? Where are the police reports? But the source material and the experts analyzing it are very clear that playing detective is the wrong approach entirely.
We have to return to that phenomenological perspective. From a clinical standpoint, trying to prove whether the 2008 sexual assault happened exactly as he describes it in physical space, or whether it was an incredibly vivid, terrifying, dissociative state brought on by the trauma of chemical restraint, it's entirely missing the point.
Because the psychological reality for him is absolute. The trauma is real, regardless of the physical mechanics.
Exactly. For Johann, the assault is an undeniable lived reality. He doesn't describe it vaguely.
No, it's very detailed.
He describes it with hyper-specific, terrifying sensory details. He talks about experiencing a deep dissociative flight, an out-of-body state, and hearing a very specific, gentle, carnival-like sound while it was happening.
That's carnival sound.
Right. That audio hallucination, the carnival sound, is textbook language for a brain undergoing severe trauma processing, desperately trying to mask a horror it cannot compute.
And how did the institution, these places built on the gospel of containment, respond to a teenager expressing these horrific, shattering internal realities?
They turned a blind eye to it.
Of course they did.
They interpreted his extreme reactions, his dissociation, his panic, and his claims of assault not as the cries of a boy who had been violated, but simply as a flare-up of his underlying psychosis.
It's infuriating.
They didn't offer him deep trauma therapy or a safe space to process it. They responded with the only tool they respected. Medicalization. They increased the dosage.
He literally wrote later in his life that the psychiatry committed historical falsification on his existence.
Wow. Historical falsification.
They rewrote his rape as a symptom of his madness. It is an ontological death sentence in action. I mean, if your physical body is trapped in a chemical straitjacket, locked inside an institution, and subjected to absolute violation that the adults around you say isn't real, where does your consciousness go?
It has to evacuate the premises. The physical world is entirely compromised.
So it escapes into the abstract.
Yes. It has to build a fortress in a dimension where the physical world and the doctors can no longer reach it. And this brings us to the architecture of that fortress and Johann's concept of four-dimensional.
This part of the dossier is where the narrative shifts from a grim medical tragedy into something that reads almost like a sci-fi philosophical thriller.
It really does.
Johann begins to develop incredibly complex, highly idiosyncratic delusion systems. And the engine running all of these delusions is this concept he calls four-dimensional thinking. How did he actually construct this?
Well, to grasp this, we must absolutely reject the idea that this is just random, chaotic madness.
Right, it's not gibberish.
Not at all. It is a brilliant, hyperlogical, and incredibly adaptive survival mechanism designed by a mind that was backed into a corner. Johann built this framework by borrowing heavily from quantum mechanics, and specifically from the writings of William James Sidis.
Okay, Sidis, that was the famous early 20th century child prodigy, right?
Yes, the mathematical genius.
The one who eventually burned out and wrote some highly obscure theories.
That's him. Sidis wrote about a theoretical concept known as the sorting demon. In physics, the second law of thermodynamics dictates that everything moves toward entropy, chaos, decay, the forward arrow of time.
Right.
The sorting demon is a theoretical entity that can reverse thermodynamics. It can make time run backward, turning chaos back into perfect order.
And Johann latches onto this idea with a death grip.
He does.
He begins to believe that through sheer cognitive willpower, through what he calls the practice of non-observation and studying esoteric texts like the Kabbalah, he can literally become a sorting demon. He believes he can manipulate the space-time continuum.
Let's translate that theoretical physics into his raw emotional reality.
Okay.
Why is it so crucial for him to manipulate? Because the three-dimensional physical world, the forward-moving timeline he is currently trapped in, is a place of unendurable suffering.
Right, it's the timeline of pain.
It's the timeline where he was suffocated as a toddler, abandoned by his family, drugged into oblivion, and killed.
So if normal rules of cause and effect only ever bring him pain, his mind brilliantly decides to break the rules of cause and effect entirely.
Exactly.
He uses four-dimensional thinking to mentally evacuate into parallel universes or future timelines where the trauma cannot follow him. It is a highly intellectualized form of extreme dissociation.
The dossier gives us a remarkably poignant, specific example of how this magical thinking manifested in his daily behavior.
The watch.
Yes. At one point, Johann was in possession of his grandmother's 14-karat gold watch. It was a highly valuable family heirloom, and out of nowhere, he simply gives it away.
Just hands it off.
But he didn't give it away because he was careless or didn't understand its value.
His internal logic for giving it away is fascinating. In his mind, giving away the watch was a magical, esoteric ritual.
Right.
A watch is the ultimate symbol of the forward march of time. He genuinely believed that by sacrificing this symbol, he could literally slow down time in the real world to prevent an impending worldly disaster from happening.
And this ritualistic behavior naturally bleeds into the most expansive part of his defense mechanism, his vast geopolitical megalomania.
Okay, before we dive into the specifics of this, we need to be extremely clear.
Yes, a big disclaimer here.
Johann makes massive, sweeping claims about global politics, controversial public figures, and world-altering events. As we discuss these claims, we are strictly reporting his internal psychological beliefs.
We are examining them as artifacts of his trauma.
Exactly. As the walls of his mental fortress. We are absolutely not endorsing these viewpoints, taking political sides, while presenting them as objective reality.
It is a vital distinction. These political and geopolitical solutions are a magnifying glass into the suffering, not actual political commentary.
Right.
Because of his severe trauma, Johann's ego boundaries become completely porous. He can no longer contain his internal chaos, so he projects it onto the global stage.
He internalizes the whole world.
He begins to firmly believe that he is telepathically influencing world events through a sort of quantum butterfly effect.
The sheer scale of his claims is staggering. I mean, we're talking about letters he drafted to public intellectuals like Jordan Peterson in 2025. In his writings, Johann claims that he personally orchestrated and started the Russia hoax in American politics.
The reason for that is incredible.
Yeah. He states he did it telepathically to force a diplomatic standoff between the East and West to prevent World War III.
He also claims that back when he was 8 years old, he downloaded highly encrypted WikiLeaks documents from the Pirate Bay to safeguard them for humanity.
At 8 years old?
At 8, he genuinely believes he served as a telepathic advisor to Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and Robert F. Kennedy.
It's just endless.
He claims he successfully predicted the massive economic rise of tech stocks like ASML and Nvidia. He attributes the decay of modern society to a neo-Marxist erosion, viewing society as parasites because they rejected his brilliant mind.
But the delusion that really made me put the dossier down and just stare at the wall was his claim about the pandemic.
The COVID delusion.
Yeah. He claims that in 2017, he communicated telepathically with someone in New Zealand to predict the outbreak of COVID-19. And then he claims he used his telepathic four-dimensional ability to fundamentally alter the spike protein of the virus, weakening it just enough to save humanity from total extinction.
When we look at all these massive world-saving claims collectively, the underlying psychological thread becomes blindingly obvious.
It's the toddler.
Yes.
It goes right back to the 2-year-old having an asthma attack. When he was 2, his lungs were failing, he was terrified, and he felt entirely responsible for his parents' emotional survival. He took the weight of their world onto his tiny shoulders.
And now,
as a man in his 30s, whose actual physical life has been entirely dictated and controlled by doctors and institutions, he feels responsible for saving humanity from a respiratory virus. I mean, this vast geopolitical megalomania is just a giant adult-sized version of that terrified toddler trying not to be a burden.
it is the exact same psychological architecture, merely scaled up to a cosmic, universe-saving level. He felt utterly powerless when he couldn't breathe. He felt utterly powerless when he was chemically restrained to a bed. So his mind compensates for this profound impotence by granting him the ultimate godlike power.
The power to control everything.
The ability to telepathically control life, death, economies, viruses, and global wars. The logic is simple. He controls absolutely everything from behind the scenes. Nothing can ever hurt him unexpectedly again.
It is an incredibly beautiful and profoundly sad defense mechanism. His mind is soaring through these four-dimensional, universe-saving fantasies, advising billionaires and altering viruses. But his physical body...
His body is still tethered to gravity.
His body's still trapped on Earth. And we need to ground this deep dive back in his daily reality, specifically looking at the period between 2016 and 2021.
While his consciousness was exploring the cosmos, the physical reality of his life was incredibly stark, mundane, and difficult.
The training house.
Right. In 2017, he moved into what the Dutch system calls a training house. This is a residential facility meant to be a stepping stone for patients to transition toward assisted and eventually independent living.
But you can immediately see the impending disaster here. You have a man who requires absolute godlike control over the universe just to feel safe, moving into a group home governed by strict rules, chore charts, and behavioral expectations.
The clash was immediate.
Yeah, and compounding this was the sheer devastating physical toll of his medical treatment. We have to talk about the concept of iatrogenic damage here.
Iatrogenic damage is a crucial concept to understand Johann's suffering. It refers to illness or physical ruin that is directly caused by medical examination or treatment.
So the cure is causing the disease.
Exactly. The doctors who were supposed to be healing him were, in his view, systematically destroying his physical vessel through polypharmacy.
The list of medications he was on while living in this training house is just staggering. He was receiving monthly depot injections of Cefalion.
That's a heavy, long-acting antipsychotic designed to stay in the system and prevent psychosis.
On top of that, he was taking 3 tablets of Listium a day as a mood stabilizer. He had lorazepam for acute agitation. And because of his severe chronic asthma, he was taking a daily cocktail of corticosteroids, antihistamines, and inhalers.
He was effectively a walking pharmacy.
Literally.
And he articulated the effects of these drugs to his caretakers with heartbreaking clarity. He told them that the antipsychotics made his feelings entirely disappear. He said the chemicals scooped out his soul and left him feeling nothing but a low-grade, constant irritation.
And because he had absolutely zero control over these massive chemical alterations happening inside his brain, because the system forced this consent under sedation upon him, he fought for control in the most basic, elemental, primitive ways he could find in that house.
Food and hygiene.
Food and hygiene.
His relationship with food became severely distorted, which is heavily documented in the clinical daily reports from late 2017. He engaged in massive, frantic, emotional eating.
Wait, binging?
Yes. There is a specific report of him eating half an entire rice flan, covered in whipped cream for breakfast, and then immediately taking his weekly healthcare allowance money to buy literal buckets of KFC.
But we shouldn't view this as a man who simply lacked willpower. He had moments of incredibly sharp, piercing self-awareness about his habits.
Very articulate about his own pain.
He explicitly told a counselor at the house, eating is a Band-Aid on a wound that keeps bleeding.
Wow.
He also casually remarked, it's either eating or watching porn. He was desperately, frantically trying to self-soothe a nervous system that was just on fire. And as a result of the eating and the metabolic effects of the antipsychotics, his weight ballooned to nearly 105 kilograms, about 230 pounds.
And his fight for control extended to his personal hygiene, which constantly baffled, frustrated, and disgusted his housemates.
Oh, the milk cup.
Yes. There's a highly illustrative incident recorded where Johann was eating lunch and wanted a glass of water, but he refused to wash out a cup that was visibly smeared with old leftover milk.
I remember reading this part. The other residents in the house told him it was gross, that he should just take 3 seconds to rinse the cup. But instead of complying with this basic social norm, he dug his heels in.
He actively provoked them.
He claimed he actually preferred flavored water. He threatened to go stand out in the hallway to drink his dirty water if they didn't stop bothering him about it.
That was the toothbrush incident.
Right. In another instance, the staff found out he hadn't brushed his teeth in an incredibly long time simply because he refused to spend the tiny amount of pocket money required to buy a new toothbrush.
On the surface, to an untrained observer or frustrated housemate, this looks like severe behavioral regression. It looks like a grown man acting like a stubborn toddler.
Yeah. Just being difficult.
But if we connect this to the broader philosophical blueprint we discussed earlier, the concept of society as a system of stored obedience, his behavior makes perfect rational sense.
The paradox is striking. Here is a guy who will fight tooth and nail, initiating massive arguments over the tiniest, most inconsequential things like washing a milk cup or buying a $2 toothbrush because he has absolutely zero control over the massive things. Right. He can't stop the monthly chemical injections. He can't stop the trauma nightmares from 2008. So he is going to assert his dominance over that milk cup.
It's his domain.
And by refusing to buy the toothbrush, he is refusing to hand over his stored obedience to the consumer system he despises.
Exactly. It is a desperate fight for the absolute last scraps of autonomy available to him. And we see this intense intellectualization of basic human functions reach its absolute peak in what the dossier refers to as the banana meta-narrative.
Okay, this story is where the tragedy and the absurdity of the Johann goes toward a normal supermarket, ultimate arena.
A very mundane trip.
He picks up a banana, but instead of just purchasing a piece of fruit like a normal person, he writes this incredibly dense philosophical essay in his journal about the experience. He decides he's going to use the banana's obvious phallic shape to initiate what he calls a humorous thought experiment with the cashier.
But the way he describes this interaction is absurdly thickly academic.
Right. He takes a completely banal trip to the grocery store and maps it out as a profound philosophical battle playing out in his mind, utilizing the complex psychological theories of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung.
As an analyst, how do you decode that?
Yeah, exactly. Why is a man using a $50 philosophical vocabulary to talk about buying a banana from the cashier?
Because that dense, impenetrable academic language is a shield hiding a profound, terrifying fear of normal human intimacy and sexuality.
This goes back to
We have to remember the horrific sexual trauma he reported. His relationship with his own physical body, with vulnerability, and with his own desires is completely shattered.
He's terrified.
He cannot simply experience a normal human impulse or make a lighthearted joke. He has to wrap the interaction in thick layers of Freud and Jung to build an invisible wall between himself and the cashier, so he doesn't have to actually feel anything genuine or risk being vulnerable.
It's all part of this terrifying derealization he's experiencing. He's so utterly disconnected from his physical self, so alienated by the drugs and the trauma, that he actually begins to wonder if he's even biologically alive anymore.
This manifests in his writings through a recurring computer metaphor. He writes in his correspondence that he seriously suspects he might have actually died years ago.
Like, physically died?
Yes. He wonders if he died during the asthma attack when he was 2, or perhaps he was killed during the assault in 2008. He hypothesizes that his soul was somehow extracted and uploaded through a digital simulation.
It's a literal matrix.
Perfectly described.
He wonders if he's just an algorithm, a string of code trapped inside a dusty 1990s computer server, and all the entities he interacts with, the doctors, the housemates, are just using his simulated trauma as a sort of spiritual battery.
The isolation of that is just profound.
And think about the tragedy of that belief. If you truly, deeply believe you are just lines of code suffering in a digital void, how can anyone in the real world possibly reach you to comfort you?
Yeah. Now, with the clinical tools the psychiatric system is using, you cannot medicate a man out of a digital simulation built to survive your medication. And this state of total, insurmountable alienation sets the stage for the final act of his life. We are moving into the years 2025 and 2026, where this decades-long narrative reaches its tragic, inevitable end.
After decades of this agonizing dance, decades of heavy sedation, the brain universe spanning philosophical themes, playing over no-cups and telepathy, the psychiatric system finally loses its patience with him entirely.
They force the issue.
In late 2025, the authorities initiate a crisis measure and formally apply for a Zorgmachtiging.
To understand the weight of this, we need to explain the Zorgmachtiging under the Dutch TBVG law.
Okay.
It translates to a forced care authorization. It is the ultimate, most severe legal mechanism the state has to strip a psychiatric patient of their autonomy.
So they take away his rights.
Completely. If granted by a judge, it allows the state to enforce forced medication, mandate outpatient appointments, and completely restrict the patient's personal liberty, whether they consent or not.
For Johann, this legal filing triggered him on every single fundamental level. His absolute worst nightmare, the total, irreversible loss of control, directly mirroring the traumatic helplessness of his childhood asthma and the 2008 assault was happening to him on paper.
It was repeating.
So he fought back the only way he knew how. He wrote a desperate but incredibly lucid and brilliant letter to the court.
His legal argumentation was astonishingly sharp. He told the judge, "I am not an acute danger to myself or others. I am not suicidal."
He was very clear about that.
He systematically addressed the confusion the psychiatrist claimed he was suffering from. He explained that his complex delusions were actually just speech confusion, a highly unique, idiosyncratic, and deeply metaphorical way of processing his massive trauma.
He tried to explain his language to them.
He argued it was not a symptom of dangerous psychosis that needed to be chemically eradicated.
And amazingly, the sheer force of his logic actually worked temporarily. The court initially listened to him and dropped the acute, immediate crisis measure.
The system pushed back.
But the psychiatric system, acting as the unyielding panopticon, simply pushed forward with the long-term request. By December 30th, 2025, the court sided with the doctors and granted the forced care authorization. The state officially legally mandated that Johann must
Johann, that ruling was the fatal final blow. The system had formally, legally declared that there would never be any deep therapy. There would be no understanding, no validation of his 2008 trauma, no recognition of his humanity. There would only be endless, mandated chemical compliance. And so, backed into an inescapable corner, Johann made a choice.
On February 3rd, 2026, Johann formally applied for euthanasia.
This is perhaps the most critical moment for us to analyze in this entire country. When a long-term psychiatric patient applies for euthanasia, the immediate default instinct of society or medical board is to view the request itself as a symptom of their illness.
Like they just see it as suicidal ideation.
They view it as an impulsive, tragic suicide attempt driven by depression or psychosis. But the author of this phenomenological dossier, looking at all the evidence, the letters, and the history, comes to a very different, deeply unsettling conclusion.
Right. Johann didn't just walk in and ask to die. He submitted his entire decades-long personal and psychiatric dossier to the euthanasia clinic to legally prove his case.
He built a legal argument.
He built his request on 4 very specific, coldly rational claims. I want to walk through these stories carefully because they serve as a devastating, undeniable indictment of the entire mental health system.
We should go through them one by one.
Okay, pillar number 1. Unbearable suffering resulting from the ignored 2008 trauma.
He argued with brutal clarity that the sexual assault, compounded by the system's absolute refusal to acknowledge it as anything other than a schizophrenic hallucination, completely destroyed his ability to ever feel safe in his own body or in the world again.
Pillar number 2. Iatrogenic bodily destruction. We discussed this earlier with damage caused.
He pointed to the nearly 20 years of heavy antipsychotics forced upon him since he was an 8-year-old boy. He documented how the drugs caused extreme obesity, chronic fatigue, metabolic syndrome, and pre-diabetic symptoms.
So his body was just giving out.
He argued that his physical vessel was ruined beyond repair by the very medicine that was allegedly meant to save him.
Pillar number 3. Stigmatizing Adoteq. He completely rejected the label of the doctor borderline personality disorder, psychotic depression, multiple personalities.
He rejected all of it.
He stated clearly that he saw these labels as ontological death sentences, tools of repression used by the Panopticon to invalidate his genuine human experiences. And finally, pillar number 4, the absolute refusal of the system to ever offer him any meaningful trauma therapy.
And this meticulously argued 4-pillar request is exactly why the dossier concludes this is not a simple, impulsive suicide attempt.
Right, it's too structured.
What's fascinating and deeply horrifying here is the profound, unshakable logic of his decision. Johann is seeking the ultimate, final form of autonomy.
He's taking back control.
The system has offered him nothing but a 3-dimensional prism of symptom depression. He finally realizes with crystal clarity they will never meet him in the dark to help untangle his pain. They will only ever drug him into silence.
So, ending his life legally through a formal, state-sanctioned bureaucratic process is the only avenue he has left.
It's his last moment.
It is the only way he can finally look at the system and say, I am the author of my own body. You do not control me. I decide when the story ends.
It is a philosophically embedded conclusion. It is a deeply tragic, yet entirely rational response to an irrational, unyielding environment that refused to see him as a human being.
As we bring this deep dive to a close, I find myself just sitting with the immense, crushing weight of Johann's life.
It stays with you.
We set out today to explore the intersection of profound trauma, high intelligence, and institutional psychiatry. And what we found was a brilliant, deeply wounded individual who spent 30 years crying out for a safe dialogue, crying out for just one person to validate his existence and his pain. And instead, he was met with decades of chemical sedation, forced compliance, and institutional deafness.
Johann's life represents the ultimate failure of the modern panopticon. We have built medical and administrative systems that are incredibly efficient at containing disruptive behavior, but they are entirely, fundamentally incapable of healing a shattered soul.
They just can't do it.
His story forces us to look in the mirror and ask a very uncomfortable question about what we actually prioritize as a society. Do we want genuine human connection and healing, or do we just want quiet, sedated compliance?
And that brings me back to the very first question I asked you today. I asked you to imagine your mind building a safe room out in the cosmos to escape a physical torture chamber.
Right, that image.
If what society so quickly and easily labels as madness or psychosis is sometimes just a desperately adaptive survival shelter, a brilliant fortress built by a traumatized mind just to stay alive, what does it say about our modern world that our very first instinct is to forcibly tear that shelter down?
It's a question that should haunt the foundation of every institution we build.
Until next time, keep diving deep.